I told you my sister passed. Her son, my nephew, passed 2 years ago, fentanyl overdose. So it is a family disease, and it just keeps going. And to your point, like I have a gentleman who actually works with us now, who he was 52 years old, and he was a heroin addict, and he was a heroin addict from his early 20s. I used to tell him, I used to say to him that next to Keith Richards, he was the longest living junkie in America, that kind of deal. And he's sober now for almost 14 years. But like you said, with the new stuff, it's almost like we become addicted to death.
Are you ready for stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation? Well, you're in the right place. This is the Knockin' Doors Down podcast, where we dive deep into the journeys of individuals who've overcome life's toughest challenges. I'm your host, Jason LaChance, certified addiction recovery coach, mental health and addiction recovery advocate. And through my recovery and mental health journey, I found I have a passion for speaking with people who have triumphed over their greatest tragedies. We uncover stories of facing great adversity to success, from addiction to recovery, from mental and physical illness to prosperity. That is what Knockin' Doors Down is all about. And if this is your first time checking out Knockin' Doors Down, hit that subscribe button on whatever audio podcast platform you're listening on. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, leave a thumb up on the video as well as a comment, because not only do I see it, which I appreciate, but my guests do as well, and they appreciate it even more. And my guest on this episode is Brian McAlister, a transformational figure who emerged from a 20-year battle with addiction and alcoholism. Brian is not only a corporate leader and entrepreneur, he also wrote an Amazon #1 best-selling book, Full Recovery, as well as establishing the Full Recovery Wellness Center. He also introduced innovative solutions with Freedom 365 and MyMentalHealth, a mental health nonprofit to make treatment accessible to all. Brian and I dig into why he started a nonprofit helping others, also why he lives by the mantra of be yourself, everyone else is taken. We also discuss how the fentanyl crisis has impacted his family directly, why it's important daily to check your motivation for what you do. And Brian and I discuss how we have a lineage of addiction in our families and how this truly is a family disease, and so much more on this episode of Knockin' Doors Down. Mr. Brian McAlister, thank you for joining me on Knockin' Doors Down.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm always, gentlemen such as yourself and people in general, such as yourself, really motivate me. I mean, you've done so much amazing work through your recovery. And so, hey, I get to pick another indirect mentor. So this is all for me.
That's it. Just pass it along what people have passed on to me. And that's really the whole deal, what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Giving it away to keep it.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to start with gratitude. So 3 things you're grateful for today.
Number 1 is I woke up with a clear head. I know what I did last night, and I know where I am right now. So that's a good start. Second is I have my lovely wife who got me on this tablet because my computer camera broke down this morning of all days. So I'm using her tablet. And number 3 is I'm here in the gorgeous Southwest, and life has been very good to me. I'm sober, I'm free, and I'm loved. Who's got it better than me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's funny. I was talking with my partner. I was talking with her last night, and I said, it's really cool is it's a Super Bowl Sunday, and I'll be completely sober the next day.
Yeah, what a concept.
And thinking back to some of those Super Bowl Mondays, so to speak, where it was either calling in sick or trudging off to work and being probably an insufferable jerk the whole day. So
yeah, I get it. No, it's all good. Got plenty to be grateful for.
Yes, sir. Well, you've done so much amazing work. I mean, you got the book, Full Recovery, the Recovering Person's Guide to Unleashing Your Inner Power. I want to dig into that. But you also went down the process of nonprofit and really wanting to help people get into treatment and work the recovery process. At what point in your sobriety did that really come about?
Well, that's a pretty recent adventure we've really taken off on. It started, my sister died of a heroin overdose back in the early 2000s. And that's when I've written 3 books. That's when I wrote the first one, because I had been sober at that time, about 15 years. And my life had become like spectacular, beyond my wildest dreams, success in many different genres. And when that happened, it made me step back and take a look at my life and what I was doing with it. At the time, when I got sober, getting financially stable and getting my relationship with my family right, and all these other things. And I was lucky. This is what happened. I achieved all that. And then when she passed, it made me revisit that. So when I wrote the book, the first book, I got it. Really it was a director from Hollywood read it, called me and said, "Hey, I'd love to go through this program in your book." And I thought, well, I really can't put him up at the New Jersey Holiday Inn if this guy wants to come back for a while. So what am I going to do? So I went out and I wanted purchasing an estate, because it was the time when the financial collapse had taken place. So I got this place really cheap, like 100-acre mansion, the whole 9 yards. And I brought him back, and from there, it turned into a halfway house. From the halfway house, it turned into a licensed treatment facility. Then from there came, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of people, but so many people came in, when I'll just speak for myself, when I was out drinking and drugging, my finances weren't really that wonderful, and I didn't have the best health care or anything like that. So I used to see people like myself wander into my treatment center. We would help as many as we could, without, on the cuff, not charge them just to bring them in. But, it was a business. It had to stay open. It had to pay for itself. So I got this idea to come up with a virtual recovery system that we can give to anybody, regardless of their ability to pay. And that's really what we've done with My Mental Health, which is our nonprofit. Anybody can log into there, and it has a 28-day program. It has assessments, like the same assessments you can get in a treatment facility. It's got over 600 videos, all searchable. So like anything recovery, like, hey, I'm arguing with my wife, my career's going in the toilet, I need to ask for a raise. Anything, the reasons people go and relapse are really in there. So it's ever expanding. And the whole goal was, again, to get people what they need to get on the path of sobriety. And it's a start. It's not, it's a way to get there. And it's a 365-day program. So it's pretty cool. We're pretty proud. We won a bunch of awards and stuff.
Absolutely. You should be proud. And I want to dig into that recovery or the relapse part of it, because I've gone through one, and I've been working with a couple people that have had the, gone through it as well. How do you really, your perspective in helping them, reframe it, ditch the shame, the guilt as quick as possible to really try to identify that reasoning? Because for us addicts, it can seem small outwardly to people, but yours, right. It could be, mine is simple, with somebody making me feel guilty for doing good in life. And it's like, you relapsed over doing good in life? Well, yeah, because I was a people pleaser and looking for outward validation, and this person unvalidated, whereas
yeah, sure.
Nowadays, if somebody did something like that, I'd be like, you've just lost a lot of accessibility to me, if not all of it. So
yeah. Well, that's really the truth, and self-sabotage is a character trait that most of us share. We're not used to being successful, so I'll speak for myself, it's happened. I'm sober for over 33 years now. I got sober when I was 32. And, my life is, I was unemployable when I got sober. I, got a minimum wage job. Like, I had no skill set, no education, and I just was kind of fumbling around. But, once things started going well, in a relatively short period of time, I started improving and things got better for me. I started subconsciously making decisions that turned people and situations against me. It was that I'm not good enough, I'm not talented enough, I'm not smart enough. That was in the back of my mind for so many years that it just kind of creeped out when I wasn't looking and came to the surface. So that's why it's so important for alcoholics and addicts. I'll use myself again. Like, I try not to look at situations that I'm involved in as a success or a failure. Because when I think if I failed, I I get down on myself. I start the negative conversation in my head, and I'm circling the drain. I start going down. I look at things now that whatever I attempt to do in my life or however my life is going, I'm just getting a result. Sometimes I get the result I want. Sometimes I get something different, just like a scientist does when making an experiment. They don't get all the results they want. That's why they're doing the experiment. But if I learn something from the experience, then, I realized it hasn't been a failure. It's been a success. I know at least now what doesn't work, which gets me one step closer to my goal.
Mm. Yeah. And that's one of the things I try to talk with or preach. I don't know what you want to put it out there is that, hey, we used to experiment with a chemical to adjust our emotional state, whatever we're going through. Now we get an experiment in a totally exciting way. Like embrace failure, what people would say are failures. Cause I think you hit the nail right on the head is there's so many wonderful lessons to be learned. And usually when you win, you don't learn much,
No, I get it.
Knockin' Doors Down by Carlos Vieira, now available wherever you get audiobooks.
I wasn't done partying, and I didn't want the binge to end. I think I knew that when I finally got home, I'd have to face what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. Being responsible for my actions wasn't something I was looking forward to. I had abandoned my wife and baby, my family, and my business. I wanted to avoid the shame of returning to what I had left behind. Even though I was not yet going home, I wasn't sure I had enough resources to continue the binge.
Click the link in the podcast description to find out more.
I do. And that's so important. And that's something I had to learn. Like when I got sober back in 1990, I wound up going, like, rehabs are kind of just starting out around that time. And I wound up in a 12-step program. And, it was good for me because I would go there and there was people and they helped me get sober and, find a spiritual centeredness and things like that. But when I looked around the room, there was a lot of people there who really weren't having the kind of life that I wanted. They weren't career minded. Their relationships weren't good. They had no clue as to which direction they wanted to head. So and not to take anything away from them. And I wanted more. I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. More is my thing. You know what I mean? So where am I going to direct that character trait that I believe was built into me at birth? So I started seeking out other solutions, and then even think about the 12 steps. AA, for example, like having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, right? We try to carry this message to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. How do you do that? So that's what I really spent my whole career doing, is figure how I can take the moral and ethical values that I learned to stay sober and bring them into my finances, into my career, into my marriage. And that's really the difference, because I believe a lot of the times people relapse is because they don't get the rest of the picture. Life still stinks. They haven't figured it out, and they get a case of the efforts.
Yeah, I agree. There's And I've done I've had somebody, I didn't like AA. Well, why not? Well, this meeting. And I go, well, try a different meeting. Because I've had to do, just go to a different one. Because I've gone through the same process, Brian. I've seen people that, and again, not a knock on them because they had, long-term recovery and I only can see what they're sharing there in a meeting, but they didn't have what I wanted. And that really resonates with me. It was, okay, I'm hearing that, but you're 15 years sober, you're still going through financial struggle, you're still having struggles with your children, you're keeping a relationship, whatever it is. Like I wanted more than that. And once I accepted, like, I'm worthy of just as much as everybody else when it comes to success, however you want to look at that. And so it was the accepting that there's going to be a point that my success is going to have to be outside of these rooms. And that's
Agreed.
A good thing. And that's the challenge that I needed.
Agreed. And, life isn't fair. Just got to get that off the table. Like, some people are dealt some really rough stuff, but I thank God every day that life isn't fair. Some people were born with disabilities. I wasn't. Some people died drinking and drugging. I didn't. So I look at these things from a perspective is thank God life isn't fair, because, if I got what I really deserved a lot of the time, I'd be dead or in jail a long time ago.
Yeah.
So like I try to celebrate that and use that to my advantage, because fear has nothing to do with it. We all have to work the hand we're dealt. And I believe that alcoholics and addicts are dealt a good hand, and I'll explain that. Because think about it, who is more committed to get what they want when they want something than an alcoholic or an addict? I don't know about you, but I would have crawled across hot coals in my face to get what I needed when I needed it. I would stand outside a tenement in Harlem and say, I'm going in there and I'm coming out with what I need.
Uh-huh.
That's really a skill set when you can take that type of commitment and motivation that God built into me and point it in the right direction. Instead of pointing it to the gutter, point it up the mountaintop. And this way I can use that to achieve my goals, to be a better person, a better father, a better husband, all the things that we all want. And that's what keeps me excited, because I do have that. Most people don't have that type of commitment, but we do.
Yeah. Yeah, it really becomes a superpower. I know when I've spoken, in a couple of high schools, and one of the biggest questions I always get is, why do you say you're a grateful addict alcoholic? And I'm like, because not only did it really give me a second life, but it gave me the blueprint for what I was always looking for, my foundational basis to achieve in life,
Yep.
and I don't measure success anymore externally. My saying is no outside solutions to inside problems. I don't look to be fulfilled by something else or someone else anymore. I realize this is internal work, and that's pretty exciting when it's like, oh, it's my higher power, me, then, flowing outward. Wow, this is pretty freeing. Like, being sober is the most free thing I've ever experienced in my life.
It really is. A guy told me early on, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And the deal was, I was always trying to figure out who I mean, I've been in the business. I'm in recovery for many, many years. And one thing, when you hear people speak, almost every time I've heard somebody share their message, was I never felt comfortable in my own skin. What I mean? I felt like the whole world had the answer and I didn't know what was going on. And I get with that. I'm born from a good long line of Catholic Irish alcoholics. I came by it honestly. That's what we did. Birds fly, fish swim, we drank. That's the way it went. So
Right.
like I get that. So the idea is I had to figure out, stop letting the world tell me who I was, and figure out with the guidance of my higher power and people I trust, people in long-term recovery, who I was, and what I was capable of with no limits.
Yeah. Boy, that landed with me pretty good. I've got addiction running on both sides of my family, and you obviously suffering the
Yeah.
loss of your sister, and that never gets easy. But how did you really step into that, accepting like, this is going to stop with me? That's the thing I decided. That was a conscious decision. This is going to stop with me.
I had the same moment of clarity. I told my son, he was just about 11 years old when I got sober, that this is going to end. We're going to break the chain right here, right now. This is the way it's going to be, because it's just an unacceptable way to live. And what's funny? It's like the people who gave me my values and my beliefs, my parents, my school, my church, my friends, the media, whatever. My parents passed along information to me that somebody gave them, and it was bad information. Like they loved me. It was just what they learned wasn't the right way to live. And I had to throw it all out and have a complete psychic change, or I wouldn't have been able. Because again, half measures get you nothing, like they tell us. I'm not a half measure guy. Most addicts and alcoholics aren't. If I'm in, I'm all in.
All right.
So that's really it. I made the same type of a decision. And I'll tell you, it was difficult in the beginning, because like I used to drink with my father, for example, my uncles, everybody hits it, and I'm from a blue collar background, about 10 minutes outside of Manhattan in New Jersey is where I was raised. And, when I got sober, it interfered with a lot of relationships. My dad could, if somebody told me you're going to quit drinking, he told me, I wouldn't have believed him, because he drank, and I'm sure at some level he knew it wasn't right, but his whole yardstick for success is, as long as you can get up and get to work in the morning, you don't have a problem.
Right.
So he our relationship distanced for quite a while. And then when he was 65 years old, he called me up, almost 66, and he had just had his second DUI. And he says, "You seem reasonably happy. What are you doing?" And I told him what I was doing. He's now 90. He wouldn't have made it to 67, and it's all because we're really resilient people, alcoholics and addicts. So he got another whole run of his life sober,
Wow.
just because he put the plug in the jug at that age.
Wow. And it just goes to show that there's not any point in life that you really can't turn it around and make that change.
No, where there's life, there's hope. And I've seen it time and time again.
Yeah. So have I. And I'm with you. I don't half-ass anything. I whole-ass. Get it all going.
Exactly. Commitment.
That's right. Oh, goodness. Let me ask you some questions, if you don't mind, about,
Sure.
what you're seeing with addiction now. Obviously, within the space that you've worked in. I mean, fentanyl changed the game and, shorten that thing. I mean, I don't mean to necessarily I've known opioid addicts or, heroin addicts. They had a 30-year run before they got sober. But, fentanyl, we don't have that time.
No, it's really crazy. I told you my sister passed. Her son, my nephew, passed 2 years ago, fentanyl overdose. So it is a family disease, and it just keeps going. And to your point, like I have a gentleman who actually works with us now, who he was 52 years old, and he was a heroin addict, and he was a heroin addict from his early 20s. I used to tell him, I used to say to him that next to Keith Richards, he was the longest living junkie in America, that kind of deal. And he's sober now for almost 14 years. But like you said, with the new stuff, it's almost like we become addicted to death, because we know what's happening. I mean, we know what the chances are, but it's easy to say it's going to happen to somebody else. And I also look at the end of my run that when I finally got sober, I was praying for the end, make that open for the end, because I didn't even believe in a God or a higher power at that time. And I just was, please, kill me or cure me time. And that's where it was. So it's a whole different animal. And a lot of these young folks that, even in high school and stuff like that, when I started, they don't get an opportunity to have that moment of clarity you and I have had, and it's, I don't know what the answer is. I really, you know what the answer is? We keep going after punishment and chasing closing the border. It's like to use an old term, it's like, closing the barn door after the cow already got out. Right. We have to get to the point where, as a society, we give people the ability to have hope, to be themselves, to not not feel like they're less than. And then a lot of the need for alcohol and drug use will be naturally just be removed from our society, rather than try to stop it once it starts. It's a lot easier to do it. It's like saying now we have to clean up the water because we dumped a bunch of pollutants in there. Well, maybe if we didn't dump the pollutants in there to begin there, we wouldn't have that problem. So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, it's a tough deal to know. I mean, I know you live in the out in the western area of United States. I live in California, yep. So I see Fresno, San Francisco, LA. I've been through them all to see it, and it's just, I don't know. I just find it so incredibly heartless that we let our brothers and sisters just be out there on the streets suffering in the way that they are. But I don't overly have the solution, and I would love to see government shift from the well, here's a clean needle, or here's a, well, okay, but have you ever said to him, hey, we also have an option to get you clean? And then, let's do, and it's
agree.
Just, what was it in the 80s? We closed up all of our mental institutions and,
late 70s, early 80s. Yep. It's opened the door.
Yeah.
And, what you said is a lot of truth. I'll use that gentleman I was telling you about, who was a 52-year-old heroin addict. He was actually quite wealthy. He had a trust of about 20 million. He was loaded. He didn't, he had enough money to kill himself, and his family couldn't really give him his money because that's exactly what he would have done. But, part of his deal was, his God-given gifts and talents, for lack of a better term, are with writing, he liked sports. He wanted to be a sports commentator, but his family had another idea. His father was a self-made man, come over from Europe, and he was a financial whiz. He became, the president of a big financial brokerage, and he thought the only way to be happy was and successful was to be a money guy. So he keeps stuffing this guy into an uncomfortable fit, square peg, round hole. He's no good with numbers. He's good with verbiage, with writing, and he's more, ethereal. The other guy's more black and white numbers, drive. So like part of our program, a big part of what we do, even on our free mental health app, is we give people the right questions. What are your gifts? What are your desires? What are your dreams? So we draw that out. We don't have them rewrite anything. It was already built into them what they're like. I don't know. I have puppies. You can tell right away, this guy's aggressive, this guy's meek, we're born with certain character traits. So we get people to look at them and not be ashamed of them and discover who they are. And then we give them the tools to go out and turn them into reality. So the idea is to take them from where they're at, get sober, give them some new ways of asking themselves better questions, make better answers instead of, why does this always happen to me? I'll never be any good. I'm a bum. We give them the right questions, and then we give them the skill set to take it to the next level. That's how you stay sober. Become what you're supposed to be.
Yes, sir. Have you dug into the archives of past Knockin' Doors Down podcast episodes? The Knockin' Doors Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
AA is not the best place for a famous atheist. I kept looking for that fucking chapter. So yeah, but it's not a one size fits all.
Sure.
It's like saying that we all think the same, like our brains are built the same. They're just not.
Right. Yeah.
There's such uniqueness involved.
Check out this episode and so many more in the Knockin' Doors Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knockin' Doors Down podcast. You said something that really hit home with me when you were talking about not a belief in God or a higher power. And I know a lot of people get turned off by maybe pursuing a 12-step program for that very reason. And and as I try to tell them, hey, I believe that there was a God. I just didn't believe there was one that loved or had a purpose for me. Mm-hmm. How did you do that work? I mean, growing up Irish, generally I'm Portuguese background, so it's like Catholic.
Yeah, exactly. It was it. We were born into it. Like my sponsor used to say, you come by it honestly. That's kind of the way it was. I was actually expelled from a Catholic high school, like a permanent out the end of a boot, which was, I was already using every day. And, I had all these, problems, and I was expelled for conduct unbecoming a Catholic, that kind of deal. And for me, that gave me just the F you type of attitude. I just went out there and said, okay, turn the other cheek nonsense I was taught. And then they throw you out in the street and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, now the world's my oyster. I'm going to go do whatever I want. And I did. I wound up living like an outlaw biker lifestyle. I was in California for a bunch of time. I was all over the country. I was living like that. And, like you've heard it before, I'm sure everywhere I went, I showed up, so nothing changed except where I was. The people were the same. I was the same. And, when I finally hit, I had a horrific motorcycle accident. I was leaving my wife and son. I was living at the time. Coke was the big thing. It was in the 80s, and I was dealing a ton of blow. And all of a sudden, I was in like a cocaine psychosis all the time. And eventually, the best thing I could come up with was to leave my wife and son on the West Coast and head back east on my bike. And I wound up getting a horrible accident. I broke my back. They were going to amputate my leg. I still have enough hardware to build a car on my leg. I took a traumatic brain injury, a couple hundred stitches in the head, hands, feet, you name it. I broke it, like Evel Knievel type breakage. And, I thought I was an atheist at that time. And when they helicoptered me into the hospital, and they put you in that little room, with the curtains around it, the emergency room, and I'm effing this and that. I'm out of my mind. I'm high on coke. I'm in shock. And, but when they closed that little curtain and I was in there alone by myself for a second, this is a quote. God, they're going to cut off my effing leg. Help me, God. All that that bravado in the bars, debating whether it was a god or this. Went right out the window when they told me, "Oh, here's the moment of truth, Brian. They're gonna chop it off." And they didn't. I asked God for that help. My wife, who was leaving, showed up at the hospital. The doctor who was going to take my leg off, I got transferred to another place where this guy saved my leg. A new guy. All these things started happening. But being an addict and alcoholic, when everything settled down after a couple of months in the hospital, I forgot all about that. First thing I did when I got out of the hospital was I live in an apartment. I threw my crutches over the railing, hopped down the stairs on my backside, and walked a mile to the bar in a back brace and the leg brace and everything else I had going on, because I needed to drink and drug that bad. And what happened was I wound up going on for 6 more years like that. It took me 4 years to learn how to really walk without those crutches. And I wound up back in New Jersey after all this time, and dragging my poor, unfortunate family behind me. And I was at the jumping off point, like they talk about. I could have killed myself at any time. And when I woke up one day behind an auto body shop in a place called Nutley, New Jersey, which is pretty apropos because I was Nutley at the time myself. I woke up, hadn't been home for weeks, didn't know where I was. And I remembered that moment in the hospital when I cried out to God and asked him to save my leg. And it popped in my head. And that was the day I said, I can't do this anymore. Please help me. And that's when I wound up in treatment that day. And that's what happened. And, it was a long slog to get to the point where I could actually say I have a spiritual consciousness, but now it's the most important thing in my life. I believe that I got away with everything I got away with because I just was so slick. Now I know that God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.
Yes, sir. Oh, and I'm with you, man. I've talked about it maybe a couple of times on here. For me, a car accident that I was married at the time, didn't want to do it anymore. And, in the aftermath, played it off. Oh, a dog ran out in front of me. No, I did that on purpose. And I walked away. I mean, I have some lingering things still to this day. If you notice me reshuffling the backs, but
that's it. Old war wounds.
Yeah, but in when I share that, like like at a high school, like I was saying, there's always, oh, that was your moment. No. I went on for about another 2.5 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. When there's no other answer, like if it had been any other way, I just couldn't take it, but it turned into be the biggest gift of my life,
Yes,
and that's it. And that accident was the biggest gift of my life, because if I had not had that horrific scene to draw on, when that moment of clarity finally popped in my head, I probably wouldn't have gotten it. But I remembered, like, I did that once and it happened and I got saved. And what's nice about spirituality is it's constantly growing and changing. It's in constant flux. As my experiences change, my understanding increases. My understanding of spirituality grows and changes, which is really kind of neat.
Yeah. Well, and I think as that does, it opens up more of, the service piece that is so incredibly vital, that getting out of our own way, our ego, that the more I explore it, I mean, it's how I start my day. I get a reading, I'm in a group text that ironically somehow comes by way of Evander Holyfield through to my buddy, through to me. And, it's like, what a weird way. I've never met or spoken to Evander, but I think about that sometimes, like, wow, the ability for people to connect in such a beautiful way, that being served and then thus taking it and going out with it, it's the part that I love to embrace, and
I
just
get
be
it.
there, as simple as the telling someone to have a nice day, holding a door, whatever it is, those little things that we can really do to just kind of make this a better place.
Absolutely. Things I wasn't chasing when I was riding my Harley all around the West Coast,
Right.
and now, like, I understand that that's really what it's all about. It's what makes me feel good about being me, to be quite frank. It's just, you're in the industry, you're around people, even if you're not in the industry, for lack of a better term, when you see the light go on in somebody's eyes, when you see somebody's family get back together, when you see all the good things that you want for yourself, somebody else getting, there's nothing better. I mean, that's a high.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a high that I never got from any drug or alcohol, and I've done them all.
Yeah. And we genuinely start to cheer people's successes on.
Absolutely.
That's such a wonderful place to be in life, where if somebody has a slip up, a failure or whatever, you don't slam them, use it to control or whatever it is. And at the same stroke, you cheer on the successes in a way you never did before.
Absolutely. When I was using, it's funny because now being sober a long time, my original sponsor in AA used to tell me, check your motivation. Check your motivation. You're very manipulative. You better look at, what I mean? And I didn't even realize it. I thought it was just a survival tool. That's what I did to get by. Everybody did it, and the hardest thing I did was when I did work the steps, originally, when I did the fourth and fifth step, I wasn't going to do that. It was like, the last thing I was going to do was tell you all my stuff because you'd use it against me, is my thoughts. So everything I had learned, I was raised and I was told this over and over again, never tell on yourself. Your friends won't trust you. Never, you keep it, you never tell it, and nothing leaves the house and all that kind of stuff. And then I come into this lifestyle and they tell me to get sober, I got to tell them myself. And it was a big hurdle. It really was a big hurdle. Well worth it, well worth it. So again, just a lot of stuff I was taught by people who did care about me. They learned the same bad information from somebody who cared about them. They were just passing it through to me. So we talked earlier how to break the chain, do something different.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking you about the rebuilding process with the family? Because it's one of the hugest concerns when someone starts recovery. I'll tell them, hey, the dynamic and families. I had a friend recently, a sister-in-law, and went into treatment. I'm like, some of the dynamic stuff is going to have to change. The having the wine at the gatherings or the holidays or whatever. Some of that stuff's going to have to go away. Maybe not permanently, but for some time. If you're really going to support your loved one in this process. How did the missus, and maybe what is some of the work she did, because she had the biker riding husband that was a nutcase out there all the time. Then
Absolutely.
Here it is, he comes back and you start to go through that spiritual shift. I mean, it's going to change the family dynamic hugely.
Absolutely. And I can say that I'm really blessed. I'm married to the same woman for 46 years. So we were kids, we jumped up, we took off and we lived in a camper, we lived in a tent, we lived off the bike, we just, it was a different time. And when we came back to Jersey, she made a decision that this can't be right. This can't be normal, and she started seeking options for herself. She actually went and talked to a therapist, and then she wound up going to Al-Anon. And I hear people put down Al-Anon and stuff all the time. I'm a huge fan because it not only saved my marriage, it saved my life. Because when she started to change and I was still using and acting the exact same way as I always did, I pushed the button, I didn't get the same reaction. It changed the whole dynamic of our relationship. And when I went in for a 28-day program when I got sober. I went up in a detox and a 28-day program. It was the same place. She actually went in for a few weeks herself and learned how to deal with her issues. And she got well and I got well. Then we got well. We had an adult relationship. And your point about, the drinking and all that, I was really lucky. She wasn't an alcoholic, but she liked to have a beer at night. She liked to do that. And she told me that if I promise her I won't drink, if I make a commitment, she says, I'll never have another beer in this house. And I'll never drink again. And she never did. So that's love. I was lucky that I had and of course our marriage was shaky for a long time. You hear people say people's wives or spouses don't want them to go to a meeting. My wife was, please get out of my face. Go to a meeting. What I mean? She was all for it. But it's been good. It's been the biggest gift of my life.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And I think, Al-Anon, Narcanon, Teen-Anon, all of those, any of those things that can start to educate the family on what addiction is, if they are not themselves, is imperative so that you really understand. And it's, it's not that we are 100% responsible for all of our actions. It doesn't,
Correct.
our addiction doesn't negate that, but addiction in itself is not the moral failure. We do a lot
Yes.
of moral failings as
Yeah,
addicts,
yeah. That's it.
you
It's a
know?
symptom, not the cause, right?
Yeah. So I think
And,
what, when I see families really embrace that, and, I encourage any type of settings. I work at a nonprofit in Fresno, California, and the founder, who's been in long-term recovery for opioid addiction, he does family support groups, and there's crosstalk in there. So it's a little bit different than an Al-Anon or an
mhm.
Arc-Anon, and that's really valuable too. So, find those sources, like understand that if you're in a family and this has affected you, you're going to have to, you're going to want to explore it. I'll tell you why. My brother, addiction didn't touch him. Me, after my dad's recovery, when I said I'll never do it, I'm the one that
Yeah,
did it
yeah. That's
because
how it
I
works.
because I went, that was his problem. That was all this. I stayed in this wonderful victim mentality forever, and I never unraveled any of that stuff, let alone know how to talk to him about it. And once, I was blessed with recovery, now we're so incredibly close, and we could talk about anything, and we have really in-depth, deep conversations about spirituality, recovery, maybe even where addiction came from. He shared so much about my family lineage on his side. And, these are valuable things that I was blessed with, because a lot of people never get that. They never get to know
Yep.
the history, let alone I was blessed with the apology that a lot of people want. Well, my dad, you
Wow.
this, and I got the apology, but I definitely had a foundation that I would have grown regardless of that. I was just blessed with that apology.
Yeah, well, that is a wonderful story, and it is a family disease. It really,
Mm.
we talked earlier, disease, uneasiness. That's really what it is. I wasn't comfortable being Brian, and once I had that first drink, that first joint, I was like, just pushing 13. I felt that immediate sense of ease and comfort that come
Mm.
from taking the first few mind altering substances. And I just went right past it, right through it. You know what I mean? I was in as off to the races. And I'm lucky, like I said, I'm more than lucky. It's a miracle that not only I survived, that I survived with my wife and I intact in our relationship. We've been lucky enough to grow and change. It's stronger now than it ever was. So, but if she didn't get well and she didn't figure out what made her want to hang out with a guy like me, but she wasn't like me. A lot of people weren't, you know what I mean? And she figured that out, and I figured out what made me like me. Then we could sit down and be adults and have a wonderful, loving, caring relationship. Nothing better.
Yeah.
Nothing. I wouldn't pay all the whiskey in Ireland. You can keep it. I'd rather have my loving relationship with my wife.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So what do we have going on in addition to my mental health, which I think I'm going to sign up, regardless where I'm at in my recovery. I'm just fascinated by that option. And that's beautiful. You put it out there. I mean, you have 3 books now. I was only aware of the one, Full Recovery, but what else do we have going on?
Well, we just closed our center. I closed it about 2 months ago. It was open for I think 13 years, and it was really great. But it's almost like when I closed the halfway house that started the whole thing rolling after the first book. I had to see how I was going to devote my time. There's only so much time, and we have a product called Freedom 365 that is also an electronic product. It's 365-day program. It's very similar to the My Mental Health one, but it has a back end on it for like corporations and hospitals and treatment facilities and all types of interaction that they can do with their clients. And this way, again, it costs $30,000 to $100,000 to send somebody to treatment. Most places don't have good health care anymore. They don't do that. So like this gives people an opportunity for a couple bucks a month per person. They can log on to this program, and you were talking about even your 24-hour a day book or your daily reader. This comes up every morning with a daily video. You know what I mean? So people don't like to read anymore. It's just hit the button and you get yourself inspirational video like you get from Evander Holyfield. You get something like that through the product. So we're doing that, and it's really getting a great reception, and we're very proud of that too, because the reason I closed the treatment center is when I closed the halfway house, I'm thinking, okay, I can touch, 30 people a year. When we open the center, I can touch a few hundred people a year. In the last couple of months, we've touched 10,000 people on this product. You know what I mean? So the idea is, how can we help more people and make it accessible, less money, more information. And we just did a release with that for PTSD too, because 40% of the people who suffer from substance use disorder have PTSD. So now we have the PTSD program where we include in there for no extra cost or anything. And the idea is, because it's digital, we could just keep expanding it, put more and more and more information out there that people can reach that I would never get a chance to talk to. So it's kind of a cool way of doing it. And that's the whole goal, to be a service, to try to help as many people as we can avoid, the pitfalls of fentanyl and an early grave, and just get it out there and just know that good things will come back our way. It always does.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll put all those links in the podcast description so anybody watching or listening can inquire more. And I'm going to dig into it. I'll keep in touch with you. I'll get back to you.
Cool.
Let you know what I think. I'm excited about that offering, because that really is the beauty side of technology that is out there, because there's a whole lot of pitfalls. Oh,
yeah,
goodness.
You ain't kidding.
We haven't even got into that.
Yeah, no, I'm right. I'm not a big, I know we're talking here, and when COVID was going on, I went to Zoom 12-step meetings, because that was what I had to do. But I had nothing like two people sitting down in a room, and that energy that goes back and forth, or with the group, trying to come up with solutions and spiritual solutions to our common problems.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. All right. We're going to jump into some fun, random questions, Brian. As the British would say, these are for shizzies and giggies,
Okay.
So we'll just have fun with them. If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Wow. One superpower, huh? I would be able, I'm not a big superpower guy, to be quite honest. I think that if I have one superpower, it would be the ability to have people be comfortable in their own skin. And the reason is, it was the key to success, a long-term recovery for me, was to discover, what I was supposed to be. There was things built into me that I just was afraid. It was fear, overcoming fear, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, said, it's not death that a man should fear. He should fear never beginning to live. And when I was stuck in my addiction, I was a 32-year-old, 15-year-old juvenile delinquent in the way I acted to life.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I wasn't living.
Oh, yeah. That resonates with me a lot, for sure. Dinner with any one person, living or not, who would it be?
I would have to say Bill Wilson, just because I owe him my life. If he didn't come up with the 12-step, every other 12-step program that there is out there came off of his experience and commitment to helping people get sober, I never would have got sober myself. So I owe the man a debt I can never pay. All I could do is give it away like somebody gave it to me.
Yeah. I've never, ironically, for talking with so many people in recovery, no one has said that.
Really?
Yeah.
I said, I know, I pray for him. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I didn't have to figure out. There's to be a lot of people who didn't get
it. That's for sure. Oh, I've seen the impact just in my own family and other loved ones. If a movie was made about you, what genre would you want it to be, and who would you want to play you? Adult you.
Adult me, huh? Well, I would say, what genre? I would think it would be, if it was my young life, it would be a thriller. And it's unfortunate that Bruce Willis isn't doing well, because I'd say Bruce Willis, another Irish bald guy. So
yeah,
that could have been it. But it's funny, because as a young man, I left home at 17, and I wound up, after I got kicked out of school, I wound up traveling the country, and I moved in with two guys back from Vietnam. they're a couple of years older than me, and they became really my first sponsors. They taught me how to do it. They own 3 porno stores, so I wanted to be in the night manager of one. They used to fly dope in from Mexico. We used to unload the plane, so I'm a 17-year-old kid thinking this is an exciting life,
right,
not knowing where this is going to lead in the long run, which I had nothing to gauge it by. But I think I would put my story with anybody's. How's that? So I'd say a thriller.
absolutely. Gosh, you just sharing that. I'm a guy that went to school for film and television. I'm already seeing the Netflix series here. This is,
Yeah.
where you can actually drop that lesson in. I've enjoyed the shows like the narco shows and stuff like that, but there's never that, that big lesson of the individual, the primary character really turning their life around. Let's see. What's another fun one? I like this one. You're on a deserted island. You have one movie and one artist's greatest hits, one music artist's greatest hits. What would they be?
I would do music artist. I have to do Van Halen. Standing on top of the world. It's pretty darn good. That kind of deal. And what was the other one?
One movie.
Shane. Riding Off into the Sunset. Ever see Shane?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Old Western. Shane is a gunslinger. And because I used to believe that. I used to believe I was riding off into the sunset, the lone hero. I didn't realize, everybody told me a man had to stand on his own 2 feet and do all this stuff and never be afraid and all this, and in reality, there's not much I could do by myself. I didn't build the computer we're talking to. I didn't make the gas in my car. I didn't make the car. I really need help I didn't get sober by myself. So, but I like that movie and I like the romanticism that goes behind the lone gunman going out into the sunset.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm a big rock fan. I worked in rock radio for 20 years before doing this. And you actually mentioned a Sammy Hagar vocal Van Halen song. Yeah. So, yep. I'm a huge Red Rocker fan. Still one of my favorite interviews I've ever done in my life. So
really? That must have been great.
Sammy was the coolest. Hey, Brian, this has been a real pleasure. I'm glad we were able to connect. And I'm going to keep in touch after. I want to dig into the my mental health and really see that maybe there's something here or a way to make it more frequently shown on the podcast here to really help people out. But this is where I like to leave you with the final thoughts. As I said before we recorded, the Jerry Springer moment, just anything you'd want to lend to maybe someone that's struggling or they have a loved one that's struggling.
Miracles happen. That I'm sitting here, and I thought I was an atheist. Now I know miracles happen, because but for the grace of God, I wouldn't have had the life I've had. I know the whole dark side of life. I lived it, and I've got this side of life, and I can tell you, this is much better. It's much easier on me. And anybody can have this. It's really as simple as finding somebody who already has experienced what you're trying to accomplish, do what they did, and you'll get what they got. If you want to look at what I did, you can go to My Mental Health, and it will give you some backgrounds on what 30 years of self-discovery and staying sober and living life to the fullest really is. And that's pretty much it. Anybody who wants to reach out to me, you can reach out to me through you, through My Mental Health. And I wish everybody a sober day.
Awesome. Thank you, good sir. And on that note, remember, no outside solutions to inside problems. Keep knocking doors down.